was just looking at one of my videos from the other night, and I was very annoyed by it because, of course, the pace of it is glacial. It's like, can you please say what you're going to say, Strauss? Because you speak at such a slow pace. Well, the reason that occurs in this kind of a context is that the things I'm talking about are I can't quite juggle it all in my head at once. I wanted to talk in this video briefly about the conception of truth as a function of meaning package consistencies, and deductive truth as being purely definitional. Uh, Saying, like, uh, so I mean, the fundamental question regarding truth is, if I say to you, that dog is running, um, it's either true or not true in that moment, and you can verify it with your eyes, right? So does that mean the truth is contingent upon whether it's consistent with reality, whether, um, you know, what's another example of a truth issue where something is true or not? I think a better one to use. See, this is the problem. It's too complicated. Um, all right. Well, okay, so it's very tempting to say that reality offers us the thing we check a statement against to see if it's true, right? In other words, a sentence, she is wearing a hat, is true depending on what we confirm or prove false or whatever in reality. Like, she's wearing a hat is true or not dependent on whether she's actually wearing a hat. Except that's not actually the way it works at all. The way it works is that, and we have to go back to the beginning to figure it out, right? It's like, go back to the beginning, two cavemen, rock, 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 rock. They're all in agreement. One time he points to something and says boulder, and the guy says rock. No, that's not a boulder. It's a rock. Is what is the gist of his emotion, because they're only learning words one at a time, right? When you put it in that context, you're not talking about sentences, and you're just saying, is this thing that? Then it's clear that the truth value of something is merely a matter of whether two people agree upon the specific label being used, at least in terms of descriptive truth that is supposedly purportedly describing reality. Now, because those symbols don't have clear and distinct boundaries for for everything really, then obviously it's just a matter of, over time, of being like, well, we both agree that big rocks are called boulders and little rocks are called pebbles and medium rocks are called rocks. And we all understand that there's some things that are on the borderline that we can't definitively say are a specific kind of rock, boulder, or pebble, So the point of all that is to point out that when one might argue that there are other kinds of truth that are clearly not just about consistency with symbol packages, such as like 2 times 2 is 4, or the circumference of a circle can be determined by blah, 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 blah. Okay, so those are, like, it's very tempting to say that something like pi is true fundamentally, whether we believe it or not, whether blah, 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 blah. Okay, Well, sort of. The thing is, it's like when we say that's true and no uncertain terms, what we're really saying is that um, the simple packs work best when symbolizing physical stuff. Basically, numbers work better as symbols than words. Um, but you would still say the reason they work better is because they more accurately describe reality or something. Again, bring us back to this reality thing. Well, I'm not going to deny. I'm not. I think you can answer the question of truth without ever even addressing the question of reality, because you see, the things are happening separately, right? It's like if you imagine a world where everyone is in a room watching a very wide television screen, and depending on where you're sitting in the room, you can only see part of the screen, and so you can only see part of the show that's going on the screen. And then what you're really doing, however, is betting on certain behaviors of the characters in the show. So everyone in this room is making wagers all the time about whether the character of the doctor will be in a coma or uh, will be getting married. What's going to happen to the doctor in this next scene? It's one of those two things, we think, or making a variety of different bets like that. So after a long time of doing this, the people watching the show will have all sorts of ideas about the show based on what they're doing on their end, right? Like Dr. Johnson is a very profitable character. In other words, he's very predictable. He's my favorite character. He's the best character on the show. He can reliably be expected to behave as I anticipate he will behave, and other people apparently are less good at predicting his behavior than I am, because every time I bet on that guy, I pick correctly and win the bet or something. So for me, if I were to say to my other competitors in the room something along the lines of um, Dr. Johnson um, Dr. Johnson is bets, is less inviting to betting on or something. This is really getting muddled, but this analogy, I don't even know where I'm going with it. I tell you, these are the things that get you when you start thinking about it too much. But anyway, the way I have it imagined is I think it would be easy to see if I could just draw it all out. I imagine a bunch of, you know, boxes. Like, okay, so like the biggest box is language. It's bigger than anything else we might put in our taxonomy because everything in the taxonomy uses language. Like, I mean, the taxonomy itself is a language exercise. So I think you have to put language as the biggest box. Everything else goes in there. And it's good to think about when you taxonomy things as words that represent words that it is the words we're dealing with, not the things they represent. You know. So when I say language is the biggest box, everything else is a subset of language. That's why. You know, if you have to have a master, like you have to have somewhere to begin, right? What are the big questions? Oh, what's the biggest box? What's the most atomic level of thing you can get to, as in sort of axiomatic, all-encompassing set? It's it. It's language. So, what goes inside that box? Well, inside that box, the thing is, what you do is you say language about, but you after a while you just leave the language about off. But you know, there's what I would call like let's start with something very simple, which would be sort of language about labor actions or something. It would start off easy enough, like or language about the body, you know, and as you start building those little sets, right? Language about philosophy stuff, and you see this whole mishmash of different words, and then they'll start to generally accumulate into boxes. I mean, the thing is, what I want to do is figure out how this all, and then ultimately the thing is, okay, so if something's true or not. Somebody says, I am wearing a hat, and she's not wearing a hat. What she's telling you is the truth or falsehood of the fact that she's wearing a hat is not actually based on the fact of, in reality, whether she's wearing a hat. It's based on the the leap that we constantly all are making when we talk to one another. We make a little leap and we pretend as though the things we were saying are the things, right? So when she says, I am wearing a hat, we know in our brain that, okay, agent B data send to me. Agent B's data packet of symbols indicates refer to visual input, anticipate visual input revealing a hat, you know. The reason why it doesn't really have anything to do with reality is that it comes from her, right? It's like she knows whether or not she's wearing a hat. These things aren't claims aren't made by nobody. That's a key point. Oh,